Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into a subject you wanted to explore, economics.
Okay.
You sent over a textbook chapter on micro and macroeconomics, and don't worry, we're going to break it down so it doesn't feel like you're back in school.
That's right. We'll unpack the key ideas and make them relevant to you because at its heart, economics is simply the study at how people make decisions in a world where we can't have everything we want.
So it's about choices, basically.
Exactly. And to understand those choices, economists zoom in and out just like you would with a map. That's where micro and macroeconomics come in.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's zoom in first. What's microeconomics all about?
Microeconomics focuses on individuals, businesses, and specific markets. It's like looking at the individual trees to understand the forest, for example.
Hmm.
How does a business decide what price to charge for its product?
Yeah.
Or how do you as a consumer choose between different brands at the grocery store?
So microeconomics is about those everyday decisions we make without even realizing we're doing economics.
Absolutely, and your textbook highlights some key concepts that explain these choices. One of the most fundamental is utility.
Utility, what's that?
Think of utility as the satisfaction you get from using a good or service. But the fascinating thing is that utility is subjective. What's useful to one person might be totally useless to another.
So like a snow shovel is super useful to someone living in a snowy climate, but not so much to someone in the desert.
Exactly, and your textbook uses the example of a stethoscope to a doctor. It's an essential tool, but to someone like me, it's just a fancy necklace.
That's a great way to put it. So understanding utility helps businesses make decisions about what to produce and how to market it.
Right? Businesses want to offer products that provide high utility to their target customers. The higher the perceived utility, the more likely people are to buy it.
Okay, that makes sense. So utility is all about understanding what people value and why. But how does that translate into actual prices in a market? That's where the whole supply and demand thing comes in, right?
Right. Demand refers to how much of a good or service people are willing and able to buy at a given price, and supply refers to how much producers are willing and able to sell at a given price. These two forces constantly interact, and where they meet determines the market price.
So if everyone suddenly wants the latest gadget, demand goes up and the price likely follows, right?
Exactly. And if there's a shortage of something, like a certain type of fruit during a bad harvest, the price will also tend to increase because the supply is low, but the demand remains high.
It's like a tug of war between buyers and sellers.
That's a great analogy. And this interaction is happening all the time in every market, from coffee beans to cars to houses.
So we've got individuals making choices based on utility and then supply and demand determining prices in the market. Is there anything else we need to know about microeconomics?
One more important concept to touch on is market structure. This refers to the different ways markets are organized and how competitive they are.
Market structure, can you give me an example?
Sure, think about a farmer's market. You have lots of different farmers selling similar products, and buyers can easily compare prices and qualities. That's an example of perfect competition.
Okay. Lots of competition, lots of choices for the buyer.
Exactly. Now imagine your local cable company. You might only have one or two options, and they have a lot of control over prices that's closer to a monopoly where there's very little competition.
So market structure impacts how much choice we have as consumers and how much power businesses have in setting prices.
That's the key takeaway. Understanding market structure helps us analyze how different industries work and how competitive forces affect pricing and innovation.
This is fascinating. I never thought about economics this way before. It's like we're taking a microscope and examining all these tiny interactions that make up the larger economic system.
That's a great way to put it. And now that we've zoomed in with microeconomics, are you ready to zoom out and explore the world of macroeconomics?
Absolutely. Let's see what's happening on the big picture level.
All right, so with macroeconomics, we're looking at the economy as a whole. Think of it like viewing a satellite image of Earth. You see continents, weather patterns, ocean currents. You're getting the big picture.
So instead of individual trees, we're looking at the entire forest now.
Precisely, we're asking questions like, what causes unemployment? How does a country's economic growth affect its citizens? And how can governments influence the economy through policies?
Those are some pretty weighty topics. What are some of the fundamental concepts in macroeconomics that help us understand these big issues?
Your textbook highlights three key areas: national income, inflation, and economic growth. Let's start with national income. You've probably heard of GDP or gross domestic product, which is the most common way to measure a country's economic activity.
GDP? Yeah, it's always in the news, but I'll be honest, I don't really understand what it means.
Well, think of GDP as the total value of all the goods and services produced within a country's borders in a specific period, usually a year. So a higher GDP generally indicates a stronger economy.
So it's like a scorecard for how well a country's economy is doing.
That's a good way to think about it. Now, inflation is another crucial concept in macroeconomics. It's basically a rise in the general price level of goods and services over time. It means your money doesn't buy as much as it used to.
Inflation. I feel like everything keeps getting more expensive. Is that why my morning coffee costs more than it did last year?
It could be a contributing factor. Think about it this way. Imagine you could buy a movie ticket for $10 last year, but due to inflation, it now costs $12. That's inflation impacting your purchasing power.
That's a real-life example I can relate to. So what causes inflation and what can we do about it?
Well, there are a few factors that can lead to inflation, including increased demand for goods and services, rising production costs, or even government policies. Macroeconomics helps us analyze these causes and explore solutions like adjusting interest rates or controlling the money supply.
So it's like a complex puzzle that economists are trying to solve.
Exactly. And finally, we have economic growth. This refers to a country's increased ability to produce goods and services over the long term. When an economy grows, there are typically more job opportunities, higher incomes, and a better standard of living for people.
That sounds like the goal, a thriving economy that benefits everyone. But how do we achieve sustained economic growth?
That's the million-dollar question, and there's no simple answer. It involves a complex interplay of factors like investment, technological advancements, education, and government policies.
Okay, so macroeconomics is all about understanding these big forces that shape the economy: national income, inflation, and economic growth. It's like trying to understand the weather patterns of the entire planet.
You've got it. And here's where it gets really interesting. While micro and macroeconomics may seem like separate fields, they're deeply interconnected.
Wait, really? How? So I thought microeconomics was about individual choices and macroeconomics was about the big picture stuff.
Well, those individual choices you make at the micro level can actually have significant ripple effects on the macroeconomy. Remember how we talked about individuals deciding to save more money?
Yeah, I remember.
Well, if a lot of people decide to save more, it can reduce overall consumer spending, which can slow down economic growth. Businesses might see lower demand for their products and services, leading to reduced investment and potentially even job losses.
Wow, I never thought about it that way. So my decision to save an extra $20 this week could have a ripple effect on the entire economy.
Potentially, especially if many others are making similar decisions. It highlights how individual actions, when aggregated, can impact the macro level.
That's a powerful insight. So it's like a two-way street. What happens at the micro level can affect the macro level and vice versa.
Absolutely, and your textbook gives a great example of how government policies aimed at tackling macro issues like inflation can influence individual prices and consumer behavior.
I'm all ears. Give me an example.
Well, let's say the government decides to raise interest rates to combat rising inflation. This can make it more expensive for people to borrow money, potentially leading them to postpone buying a new car or a house. This, in turn, can slow down certain sectors of the economy.
So the government is trying to control the big picture, but it ultimately impacts individual choices and behaviors.
Precisely. It's a constant dance between micro and macro, a complex interplay of forces that shapes the economic landscape we live in.
This is blowing my mind. I'm starting to see economics in a whole new light. It's not just about numbers and graphs, it's about understanding the interconnectedness of our choices and the forces that drive the economy.
That's exactly right. And that brings us to a thought-provoking question posed in your textbook.
Yeah.
If you were an economist advising the government, what would you focus on more microeconomic issues, like individual markets, or macroeconomic issues like the national debt?
That's a tough one. It's like asking a doctor to choose between treating a patient's heart or lungs. You need both for the body to function properly.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. A healthy economy requires attention to both micro and macro levels. It's about finding the right balance between fostering healthy competition in individual markets while managing overall economic factors like inflation and unemployment.
So there's no easy answer. It's all about understanding the complex interplay of these forces. What's the key takeaway for our listener after this deep dive into the world of economics?
I think the main takeaway is that economic forces are constantly at work in our lives, even if we're not always aware of them. Every decision we make, from what we buy to how much we save, participates in this intricate economic dance. And understanding the basic principles of micro and macroeconomics empowers you to make more informed choices both for yourself and for the broader economy.
That's a great point. The next time I'm at the grocery store deciding between different brands, I'll remember that I'm not just choosing a product, I'm participating in the forces of supply and demand.
Exactly. And when you hear news about GDP, inflation, or interest rates, you'll have a better understanding of what those terms mean and how they might affect your life.
This has been an incredible journey. Thanks for guiding us through the fascinating world of micro and macroeconomics.
It was my pleasure. It's always exciting to see someone discover the power of economic thinking.
And to our listener, we hope you enjoyed this deep dive. We encourage you to keep exploring the world of economics. It's full of surprises and insights that can help you make sense of the world around you. Think about this. What small changes could you make in your spending or saving habits that might contribute to a healthier overall economy? Until next time, keep those brains buzzing and keep diving deep.